Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Undiscovered Metric. I'm Michelle Lagruda, and today we have Alex Sofronas with us. So Alex is an expert in performance marketing and data analytics with a focus on personalized user experiences. He also hosts the Marketing Times Analytics podcast, where he talks about data-driven marketing and the latest marketing trends. Alex, thank you for joining us today. If you can share a little bit about yourself, your background, and what got you interested in data-driven marketing.
Sure. Thanks for having me, Michelle. I have a background in marketing and analytics. I went to university at DePaul University. I studied marketing and data science there. After that, I moved to New York City to work for IBM for a few years. And after that, worked for DirecTV for a few years, all in the marketing and performance marketing and analytics space. So I have a lot of experience in the area, and then every week I'm coming out with new episodes where I talk about different areas of the marketing and analytics world. So definitely, a lot of exposure to the industry. It's a rapidly growing industry, and it's still kind of a niche. So I'm really excited to share what I've learned today.
And that is interesting. So having worked in different marketing roles and having exposure to just different industries, what are some common challenges that you've faced that might be applicable to just a vast majority of marketing teams?
Yeah, so there's definitely a couple of common challenges that you'll see in performance marketing teams. One is definitely data quality. That's something that sort of a persistent issue. You see that in organizations of any size. And as the companies get bigger, as the data gets bigger that you're housing, there's just more chances for something to go wrong as the data is flowing from the source to wherever it's being analyzed. So that could be anything from the formatting of the data coming from one system to another. Maybe it's like timestamp data, which is notoriously challenging, where maybe you're including seconds in the timestamp and you have to convert that into another format so that it sort of meshes or so it's better integrated into a new system. Or maybe there's missing data values and you have to sort of do a transformation to fill in wherever the nulls are. There's a lot of different ways that data quality can be an issue. Sometimes there might be data and it's wrong for some reason. And so it looks like it's being populated correctly, but it's actually off by a certain number, something like that. So I have a couple of examples. Apparently, Coca-Cola faced challenges with their data issues, their data quality, and they invested in cleaning and integrating their data, and that improved their marketing ROI by 15%.
Mhm.
And then Procter and Gamble, there's another example. They streamlined their data processes across their teams, and that led to a 20% reduction in reporting time and increased focus on strategy. So there's those are a couple of anecdotes, but in general, there's that's one of the biggest things that you need to get right when you're in a performance marketing role, because fundamentally, once if the data is off by any amount, then that's going to impact your findings and your optimizations. Another challenge in marketing roles is figuring out what key metrics should be aligned on across the teams. So there's sort of two parties in the marketing world. There's people who are revenue-driven marketers. This is sort of new age marketing where it's very data-driven and everything is tied to revenue. And then you have the sort of more almost more intangible, the marketers that believe more in the intangible side of marketing, where they're focused more on the upper funnel, increasing brand awareness and using that to generate more traffic. And of course, the answer is somewhere in the middle. It's not just putting money into things that directly convert, and it's not just putting money into the upper funnel to generate awareness and then increase consideration. It's somewhere in the middle where you are generating a pipeline in the upper funnel, but you're also really closely measuring the lower funnel. And so you have to balance both of them. as hard as it may be, and that kind of upsets everybody, right? Because there's going to be half of the people that disagree with putting the money in one of the two places, being the upper or the lower funnel.
Mhm.
Um, so yeah, it can be challenging because everybody has their own goals in an organization. So all the executives, they want certain things to work. Maybe they have a new product that they want to let the audiences know about. But that might take away funds from a different kind of marketing activity that can happen that
Mhm.
maybe has more lower funnel conversion. So maybe the executives want to use marketing as a lever for future growth, and that marketers might disagree because they might say, well, there's a lot of maybe low bearing fruit, a lot of opportunity here to convert people, and we shouldn't be spending as much on the upper funnel conversion. And sometimes it's the opposite. Sometimes it's like we're having trouble with the lower funnel conversion because we haven't spent enough time in the upper funnel. So understand, and then the metrics that you measure for both of those are completely different. So when you're looking at the upper funnel, you're doing things like surveys for audiences and seeing what is their brand affinity, what is their um, how do they feel about your brand? How well do they know it? Are they aware of all your products? How do they feel about your different products? Do they consider you in a competitive set with your competitors? What do they think about when they see you? So you're measuring very high level things about populations, and you're measuring how those slightly change over time. And then the lower funnel is more, of what we would consider like traditional marketing metrics, conversion metrics. What is the cost per sale? What is the response rate? Um, what is the second, multi purchasing rate? When you're looking at customers, how many times are they purchasing? The average order value and all of that, and that can be used to optimize your targeting and how you communicate with the prospects during the marketing process. So figuring out what your key metrics are is important, and it's secondary to whatever the overall goals are of the organization.
Mhm.
If it's grow, let's say the goal of the organization is to reduce marketing costs, then your key metric that you're aligning on would be more on the cost side, the cost per sale, maybe the lifetime value, and optimizing that ratio. um, so yeah, it can be challenging. It could be very political. Marketing is definitely one of the more political places in the organization because there's so many different ways to measure it, and so it can, there's a lot of errors that can be made along the way. It's a very strategic sort of mentality, so it's important to get that sort of sorted out first and make sure everybody's on the same page with what are our goals, and then that will ladder down into what are the key metrics we should be measuring to achieve those goals.
You touched on this at the end of your answer, and anyone working in marketing knows that it's a very collaborative, very cross-functional role. But how have you worked to reach alignment with different colleagues or different teams when working across marketing reporting?
Okay, so there's a lot of things you can measure in the marketing space, and it's important to make sure that that's clear with everybody. That there's a lot we can be looking at, but let's focus on what are the things that are going to drive the most impact. And it's very tempting to measure everything and to put everything onto a report, but I think it's important when you're looking at reporting to first you have to align with, what do the executives, what does leadership want to know? Because that's typically why you're reporting. Otherwise, it's sort of more of an analysis. And analytics can be a little bit more broad, and you can get a little bit more creative with what you're looking at because they're more like in the weeds marketers that are looking at it. But for, standard reporting, you're typically going to want to connect with your stakeholders and ask them what they're looking to track and what kind of cuts of the data. How would they like to de-average the data? Maybe they want to see it by country, performance by campaign, by month, by product. There's all sorts of different ways to look at it, and so it's important to communicate with your stakeholders and see what they want to do. Um, and then when it comes to, and I think this is more of your question, when you're looking at within the marketers who are in the details, who are looking at everything day to day, and working more on the operation side, not like the management side. That's where I think it's important to have really, open brainstorming sessions with different people in the marketing team, using maybe collaborative tools like whiteboarding tools, and maybe you're in person with an actual whiteboard, and just map out, what do you want to optimize based on? If it's cost per sale, what are all the different ways that we can look at cost per sale? So it's important, and then also looking at where the data is coming from, because there might be a couple of different ways to get to an answer, maybe using assumptions. And so it's important to say, here's where we want to get the data from, and making sure everybody's aligned with that flow of data. Because if the fundamentally the data needs to be something that everybody can trust, and if there's issues with the data, that's very tough in the marketing world. I mean, it's tough in any part of the business. I'm sure in finance and legal, like, it's probably even worse to have data that's a little bit off. So in the marketing world, we're used to a little bit, like maybe a percentage point or two of variance between data sources. So there is a little bit of that, but it's still really important to agree that everybody generally trusts this one source, and if it's off, how much is it off by, and can we sort of estimate and correct it? So a couple of examples here. So Adobe implemented a CDP, a centralized data platform, and that resulted in a 25% increase in campaign efficiency. And then 62 overall from Forrester, 62% of companies report that misaligned goals lead to inefficiencies in reporting, which makes perfect sense, because depending on the goal, you'll have a completely different set of reports. And the report isn't just, take the data and put it directly into a dashboard and let you do anything you want with it. A good dashboard is going to actually have more limited use cases, and it's going to be focused on exactly what the user should be thinking and processing in order to find an optimization. It should not be sort of like an exploratory world. This is sort of how I built dashboards in the very beginning, where you can kind of do anything, you can cut data anyway. The problem with that is that's going to slow the dashboard down significantly. We've all seen really slow dashboards, and they're just so frustrating. And that's because the person making the dashboard has not reduced the data down enough. Probably, I mean, maybe the data is like crazy, but usually that's because the data set is too big. So it's really important to know what you want to get out of the dashboard and limit the data to exactly what is going to help the user find an optimization to improve their campaign performance.
One thing that I'm excited to talk to you about here is if you would be able to share an example of how in the past you've combined traditional marketing with newer tactics or channels.
With the traditional and new marketing tactics, the way you combine them is with what's called identity resolution. So what that means is, let's put to the side data privacy, because this is going to sound weird because we're under the impression that there's all of this privacy, and there kind of isn't in this, at least in the direct mail world. They have what's called like a prospecting database. There's like massive prospecting databases available for rental. You can't purchase it, you can rent it. And what happens is these companies will go out and buy as much data as they can about every person in the US or in the world. I would assume. I've only worked with US based prospecting lists, but I'm sure it works very similarly in other countries, where you have a list of people, you have the way to contact them, maybe their email, maybe their phone number, and then you have tons of variables about them. You have, what they call modeled variables, where you're assuming something based off of certain data that you have. You're assuming other things about them using a model. So you can look at their age and their income and their marital status, and maybe you can estimate how many kids they have. And they can create a model to do that, and then they'll include that as a variable for rental. So when you're renting these data sets, you can pick and choose what you would like to use, and then you can use them on your own models. And another part of that data set is when you have their name, it also includes a sort of a digital ID. And so that's a unique identifier for that person that they are connecting to their IP address, their, they have everybody has like an identity on their phone, like a MAC address or things like that, that will allow the company, the data provider, to actually track and target that prospect online. Now they can't do it in certain tactics, but they can do it in like programmatic, for instance. So when you want to, let's say you have a group of 1,000 people in Austin, Texas, that you want to target offline and online. You could send them, a direct mail piece pretty easily using this prospecting list. And then you can take that list of 1,000 people and you can give it to a programmatic media distributor and say, here's my 1,000 unique addresses for these people. Can you go out and target them with programmatic display? And they can do that. So now you're reaching those people with, in their mailbox and also while they browse the web. But they can also do something cool where they can upload those individual, their contacts, maybe I think they're like their email and their name and stuff. And you can send that to Meta or any of the social networks, and you can do what's called a lookalike campaign. And lookalike campaigns are very popular. So basically that's going to take that 1,000 people audience and maybe include their location as well. And it's going to target people who look just like them. It's probably going to target some of them too. But the key to note with the social targeting is that it's not going to be exactly them. We're not going to know on an individual basis if we reach those 1,000 people and how many times. And that's because of what's called the walled gardens. So that's what makes this whole thing tricky. And that's, that's where the privacy does come into play. So, but it's really privacy that benefits the social networks, because they want to keep everything, in a black box. The closer the data is to the social network and away from us, the more the social network has leverage. They can run their own models because we can't run our models to target on their platforms. I mean, we kind of can, but not in the same sense as direct mail, for instance. And this is actually like a key value that Adverity brings is, kind of taking the data from all these different social networks and making it a lot easier to use. But, you're still not going to get individual level data like Alex, clicked on this ad that we put on Facebook and went to our website and converted. They'll only know like the number of people and all of that. And even that data is really important to optimize based off of. But yeah, the walled gardens are tricky. And it's mostly for the benefit of the social network. But that being said, lookalike campaigns still work well. So the system still works, even though there's this barrier. So in conclusion, I would say, be really careful about which tactics you use when you're combining them. And make sure that you're first thinking of the audience and what platforms they are using and resonating with. And then you can go to, the integration between tactics and design that in an intricate way. But it's a high level of effort and it really has to be worth it.
What would you say is a key metric that you use to measure success when you're kind of focusing on those traditional, non-traditional campaigns? Like, is there a metric that you're able to kind of carry across, the several different channels, or, maybe it's a bundle?
If there's one marketing metric for key success, it's return on marketing investment. And what that means is when you take the marketing cost and you take the lifetime value of all of the people that were brought in from that marketing, you're looking at a ratio, a return ratio of your marketing. If it's one, if it's a ratio of one, that means your marketing costs and your lifetime value are equal. And what you want to do as a marketer is try to optimize that number, especially in the lower funnel. But this actually works overall for your portfolio. Obviously, the upper funnel is going to have a much lower return because by definition, you're casting a really wide net and not everybody's going to purchase, but you're going to get more people to purchase if you do that in the lower funnel. And so that's going to improve. So the lower funnel then that is somewhere where return on marketing investment will look better. You will have a better conversion ratio because whoever gets to the lower funnel is already at a higher propensity to buy. So you're talking about different propensities to buy in the different funnel stages.
And then I would just say finally for our last question, if someone is just starting on their journey of working in performance marketing, what's one piece of advice that you would give them to help get them started on the right foot?
Marketing is more popular than analytics. So you're getting into a hybrid job here where, you're doing both, the strategy, the marketing stuff, and the analytics stuff. So make sure you have a strong technical foundation. And that's not to say you need to be a coder. SQL is widely regarded as one of the easiest, if not the easiest, coding language. And I could personally attest to that. And so definitely try to learn SQL right off the bat. If you can, learn Python. Learn basic statistics. Learn how to do different types of tests, how to read test results, how to do significant tests. Just familiarize yourself with the testing, the statistical testing process and the scientific method. And all of that could be done online for free. And then I would look into, then I would start to explore the marketing side. But honestly, what will get you the job is probably the analytics skills. They're probably not going to be too worried about your marketing knowledge because if you know how to read the data and you understand marketing in general, like what you're doing, then the marketing becomes very intuitive. Like we're trying to increase this conversion number. Well, what are the factors we can look into behind this conversion number? It's like there's no marketing theory you're applying. You're just asking questions and looking at the data. And your goal is to improve the customer throughput and to increase purchasing intent. So, marketing is changing so much that I would not say, you want to get into marketing analytics, go get a marketing degree. I would say if you're getting a degree, make sure it's a technical degree like analytics, and maybe you can add marketing to that. I did it the other way, but I would recommend you do an analytics first, and then you go into marketing. And then you will learn a lot of marketing as you go. In the role, you will start to learn marketing a lot better. It's just so hard to say like, here's the one place you should go to learn marketing. I mean, I will say, I have a podcast, Marketing Times Analytics. This podcast, the Adverity podcast, great places to learn about different topics in marketing. So I would say, yeah, learn from podcasts, learn some marketing background from podcasts. The current state, learn the tools. Get the Google Ads, Google Analytics certifications. If you want to get like maybe a part-time job, like if you're looking to do consulting, that the technical certifications are going to really help you. Maybe the HubSpot certification, maybe Salesforce certification. Those are all going to make you stand out, and probably even more than some degrees, honestly, if you have like a technical certification versus like a general marketing degree. Because nowadays the world has changed a lot, and there's a lot less of that barrier of like a college degree, especially if you have technical skills that you can prove. Then it's like, well, you have the skills, you're qualified. So so I would say start with the technical stuff, then move on to some higher level marketing, listen to podcasts. You'll pick up a lot of it on the job. And reach out to people who have jobs that look interesting to you on LinkedIn and really expand your network. Focus on that. Learning from other people that are sort of in an area you want to learn from, get some mentors, because this industry is evolving so rapidly that by the time it trickles down to the education system, they're teaching stuff from a few years ago.
Right.
And so, you want to talk to people who are actually in the industry and who know what it's like at the cutting edge and what's coming out next. And so they can help you sort of position yourself as a more attractive candidate.
Amazing. That's great advice. Thank you. I really want to thank you for joining us today. This is a really great conversation. I personally learned so much. You gave a lot of really great insights, a lot to think about, and I'm sure, anyone watching this has a lot to take home and some inspiration perhaps for their own marketing campaigns or future strategies.
Thank you, Michelle. Great to be on.